Hi, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church Stony Stratford. And this Good Friday, I've got a reading for us from Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14 to 16. It's helpful sometimes to have a visual aid to describe things or explain things to us. And this is certainly what this passage did for the Jews at the time. I think with a bit of explanation, we'll find it a helpful example of what Christ has done when he went to the cross. So let's read. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. What does this make clear about Jesus, even before we start thinking of his work on the cross? Well, the first thing, he is like us. And it's interesting, isn't it? It talks about him being like a high priest, but a sympathetic one. He can sympathize with us. He feels what we feel. He felt disappointment. He felt joy at times. He would have felt tiredness. He would have felt everything that our bodies are liable to. And yet, here's the difference. We noted in verse 16, he was tempted in every way, yet he did not sin. He kept God's law in its absolute entirety. Now, that's quite a challenge. One of the things I've been saying when I've been out on the high street recently is we may think we can keep the 10 Commandments, but the trouble is, in the end, if we look at the way Jesus taught them, which wasn't just about keeping the letter of the law, but keeping the spirit of the law, an example being do not murder, and he says actually if you're angry with someone, you've already broken that law in your heart, then we realise that we fail. But Jesus didn't just keep the law in action by not doing, he actually kept the law in his heart. And here's the incredible thing, he's the only priest we need. And don't let anyone persuade you of anything else. It doesn't matter how they're dressed or anything like that. I can remember once I was sitting with a guy. He talked about me in terms of a priest, and I said, look, hey, I'm no priest. I just point the way. You want to be right with God? Pray to him. Ask for forgiveness. But the picture here is an interesting one. It's really a picture of what was known in the Jewish festivals as the Day of Atonement. It was the biggest day of the year, as it were. And they all used to go up to Jerusalem, and the high priest used to go through a whole series of ceremonies and then sacrifices. So he's ready to go into what was called the Holy of Holies, and he'd only go in there perhaps once in a lifetime. It had to be agreed. He had to be sort of chosen by lot. And only he could go in and offer the sacrifices, and then he would come out and put on the ceremonial robes, and he would go out and bless the people, and everyone would feel really good and go off with a spring in their step. But the problem was this: it had to be repeated year after year. But Jesus' sacrifice is different. It talks about him here, doesn't it? That he entered heaven. He went through the heavens. And here's the wonderful thing, isn't it? That he went into the heavenly tabernacle, which of the earthly temple was only really a copy. And here's the thing. His sacrifice is completely sufficient. And this is very, very important. Why? Because he goes where only he can go. His sacrifice doesn't take place in heaven. It takes place at the cross. And then it says this, doesn't it? And here's the incredible thing. It includes us. Verse 16. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Now, this is incredible because the Jews who would have heard this would have thought, hey, we can't go through the curtain into the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest can do that. And the writer's saying, no, you can. Because where Jesus goes, those who are his people, those who have sought forgiveness, those who have realized they cannot keep God's law, and that makes all of us, whether we're a minister or just someone who attends church or doesn't attend church, if we're forgiven, we can go where Jesus goes. The unthinkable is shown here. How do we know that? In Mark 15, verse 38, it talks about when Jesus died, the curtain of the temple was torn into from top to bottom. In other Gospels, what does Jesus say? It is finished. In other words, his work is accomplished. All the law has been fulfilled perfectly in him. He has kept God's holy law with perfection. And here's the wonderful thing. How does that apply to us? Well, in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, we read this. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. The one with no sin was Jesus, as we've just been looking at and understanding from that picture of the priests going into the Holy of Holies. And we are the ones who need to be given that righteousness. He took our sin upon himself once and for all. And we can be his people and go where he goes if we confess our wrongdoing, confess that we failed to keep God's holy law, or we can be invited in. I'd love to offer you a little gospel. This is the Gospel of Mark. We're giving them away free. If you see me on the street tomorrow, Saturday, I have a good number of them. You're welcome to come and take one or ask for one. I won't tell your name and address. Or they're on the railings outside the church. Anyway, have a great Good Friday, and we'll see you again on Easter Day.